On the evening of December 7, 1811, a tragic incident unfolded in the dimly lit and derelict quarter of London, known as Ratcliff Highway. This thoroughfare, formerly called Ratcliff Highway but now known simply as the Highway, resided on the southern edge of the city, flanked by Cannon Street Road and Artichoke Hill. It was one of the primary routes connecting the city to the outside world, yet had descended into an area of squalid establishments, gloomy alleyways, and deteriorating lodgings. The unfortunate victims of this initial assault were members of the Marr family. Timothy Marr, a man whose age was variably reported as either 24 or 27, had previously served several years under the employ of the East India Company aboard the trading vessel Dover Castle. At present, he operated a shop that dealt in linens and hosiery. Timothy was joined by his young wife, Celia, along with their infant son, Timothy Jr., who was a mere 14 weeks old at the time and had been born on August 29. The household also included an apprentice named James Gowan and a servant girl named Margaret Jewell. Their abode had been situated at 29 Ratcliff Highway since April of that year. As the clock neared midnight on December 7, 1811, the Marrs were immersed in their shop and dwelling, busily preparing for the following day's business activities. In the midst of their preparations, an intruder infiltrated their home. This fateful night was a Saturday, a day of high activity for both the British workforce, due to payday, and for local shopkeepers. Margaret Jewell was absent from 29 Ratcliff Highway during this time. She had been dispatched to procure oysters, intended for a late-night repast for Timothy Marr and as a treat for his recently postpartum wife. Furthermore, she was entrusted with settling an outstanding bill at a nearby bakery owned by John Hill. One account noted that, upon opening the shop door, Jewell caught sight of a figure silhouetted in the light. Ignoring the sighting in the bustling evening atmosphere, she proceeded with her errands. Unfortunately, her attempts to secure oysters were in vain, leading her back past the Marrs' residence, where she glimpsed her employer working through the window. Eventually, she reached the bakery, only to find it closed, and thus returned to the shop empty-handed. Upon her return at approximately 20 minutes past midnight, Jewell encountered a darkened building with a locked door. Assuming that her employers had simply forgotten about her absence, she knocked on the door, but her calls went unanswered. She initially detected no movement inside, but then discerned what sounded like footsteps ascending the stairs, leading her to believe that assistance was imminent. Meanwhile, the cries of the infant Marr were audible from upstairs. However, her knocks were met with silence. Hearing footsteps behind her on the pavement, Jewell's trepidation grew, and she resorted to violently striking the door knocker, inadvertently drawing attention to herself. Responding to the commotion, a night watchman named George Olney, who customarily announced the time every half hour, approached to ascertain the situation. As an acquaintance of the Marr family, Olney knocked on the door and called out, only to notice that the window shutters were positioned but not secured. This observation aroused the curiosity of John Murray, a pawnbroker residing next door to the Marrs. Alarmed by the unusual activity, Murray scaled the dividing wall between his yard and 29 Ratcliff Highway. A glimpse inside revealed an illuminated interior with the back door left ajar. Murray entered the premises, ascending the rear stairs and admonishing the Marrs for neglecting to secure their shutters. To his initial relief, he heard no sounds. Returning downstairs and venturing into the shop, Murray was confronted with a gruesome scene, which he described as the aftermath of a night of carnage. The space was so saturated with blood that navigating through it without encountering the gruesome residue was nearly impossible. His gaze fell upon the lifeless body of James Gowan, the apprentice, lying just inside the shop entrance, around 5 feet from the stairs. The young man's facial bones had been brutally shattered, his blood dripping onto the floor, while the remnants of his brain were scattered across walls and countertops. Murray proceeded to allow Olney entry, and together they embarked on a search for Timothy Marr. Their grim exploration led them to the back of the shop, where they discovered Timothy's battered corpse behind the counter. Urgently, they ascended to the living quarters, where their harrowing quest culminated in the discovery of the infant Timothy Jr. in his crib. The infant's peaceful slumber had been viciously disrupted, his visage marred by a brutal assault, and his neck nearly severed. By this time, the gathering crowd had attracted the attention of Thames River Police, prompting the arrival of the first officer on the scene, Charles Horton. Given that no apparent theft had occurred, money remained in the cash register, and a substantial sum of £152 was located in a bedroom drawer, the motive behind the grisly attack remained elusive. While the possibility of a thwarted burglary existed, the prospect of a revenge-driven assault by someone acquainted with Timothy Marr also loomed. Horton's initial hypothesis centered on a ripping chisel as the potential murder weapon. Although such a tool was discovered on the premises, it was devoid of any signs of blood. In the bedroom, Horton came across a weighty, long-handled shipwright's hammer, its surface caked in blood. This gruesome implement leaned against a chair, with human hair trapped within the drying blood on its broad end. The pointed end, typically utilized for driving nails into wood, bore chipping. Furthermore, 2 sets of footprints were found in the rear section of the shop. These prints bore the traces of blood and sawdust from carpentry activities conducted earlier that day. Tracing the tracks to Pennington Street behind the residence, a potential witness reported encountering a group of around 10 men fleeing from an empty house in the direction of New Gravel Lane, now known as Glamis Road, shortly after the alarm was raised. Speculation began to circulate that the crime might have been executed by a criminal gang. Horton transported the blood-stained hammer to his station for examination, where he encountered 3 sailors who had been observed in the vicinity on that fateful night. While one of them exhibited stains resembling blood on his clothing, all 3 managed to provide solid alibis, leading to their release. Additional individuals were apprehended based on eyewitness accounts, but the cases against them ultimately unraveled. In an effort to solicit assistance from the local community, a reward of 50 guineas was offered for information leading to the apprehension of the perpetrator. To spread the word among the residents, a handbill was drafted and posted on the doors of nearby churches. On December 10th, a panel of jurors presiding over the coroner's inquiry listened to evidence suggesting that an observant individual had been monitoring the shop and dwelling, awaiting an opportune moment. The time frame for the crime was established as occurring between 11:55 p.m., when Margaret Jewell departed, and 12:20 a.m., when she returned. John Murray, a key witness, recounted having heard thumping sounds at around 12:10 a.m. Consequently, it was surmised that the assailants had still been present within the residence when Jewell arrived back, subsequently making their escape through the rear exit. An effort was launched to trace the origin of the murder weapon, the maul, utilizing a distinctive chip on its blade. Although devoid of bloodstains, the chisel's significance was underscored by Jewell's account of Timothy Marr searching for a similar tool earlier in the evening. This heightened the suspicion that the chisel might have been brought to serve as a weapon, purposely concealed to evade Marr's attention. Among those initially detained for questioning was Cornelius Hart, a carpenter who had engaged in work at the shop that day. Despite his temporary detainment, no substantive evidence could be marshaled against him, leading to his eventual release. Another individual subjected to scrutiny was Marr's own brother, owing to rumors of a past dispute. After undergoing 48 hours of interrogation, he was eventually cleared of suspicion due to the presence of a solid alibi. Similarly, a former servant girl, who had previously been dismissed, underwent questioning, but her lack of motive and absence of criminal associates rendered her an improbable suspect. Furthermore, her diminutive stature made her an unlikely perpetrator of the brutal murders. Subsequently, a commemorative service was held in honor of the 4 victims, who were interred beneath a monument within the confines of St. George in the East, the parish church where the infant had received his baptism 3 months earlier. During the cleaning of the mall on December 19th, an intriguing revelation emerged. Faint initials appeared to have been carved into the handle, potentially etched using a Siemens coppering punch. The letters IP or JP now furnished investigators with a potential lead to trace the ownership of the weapon, injecting fresh momentum into their efforts to solve the baffling case.